The whip is always working. You see that? First of all, good evening, and thank you all for joining us at our annual conference. You know, last time we were at this setting, we were coming together to put the commitment to America together, to roll out to the American public, if they would trust us with the majority, what we would do with it. I'm proud to say, yes, we did win the majority, speaking to the American public directly on exactly what we would do, and we're carrying out that promise. It's not often you hear those from Washington that keep their promise. So we're 3 months into the 118th Congress, and the numbers actually speak for themselves. Already, we've passed 35 bills have passed the House. 30 of those have been bipartisan. It's more than 86%. Pretty impressive. You don't hear that a lot from Washington, but it's the power of the idea can bring both sides together. As a majority, we've already accomplished quite a bit that we promised the American public. Even before taking office, we were able to lift the COVID vaccine mandate on our troops. In December, we told the President and the NDAA to lift it now so we can help meet the requirements that our troops could fill the void of recruitment that we weren't reaching and stop moving the best men and women in the country out of the service, and they were able to stay in. On day one, we kept our promise as exactly what we said we would do, that we would stop funding 87,000 IRS agents and passed it through the House. We ended proxy voting. The members actually have to show up for work. Reopened the People's House to the people, and returned to regular order that empowers members and restores the people's voice in Congress. We established the Select Committee on China, with 146 Democrats joining with us. Too long, America has never spoke with one voice. We already watched the benefits of it. This was all long before the balloon came across America, and then we were able to pass the resolution condemning the CCP on that balloon with 100% of Congress, Republican and Democrat, voting together. On another note, we blocked the sale of the American oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to China, and 113 Democrats joined with us as well. Most recently, Congress passed a resolution to nullify D.C.'s new soft-on-crime code. More than 30 Democrats joined with us that day. Even one Democrat experienced a crime in D.C. on her way to work that day. This resolution was about keeping D.C. safe, but it was also about keeping our nation safe. We're watching this reverberate across America, city by city. The defunding of the police, the decriminalizing of many of the crimes has led to higher crime, and we were able to stop that. The President at the beginning said he was opposed to it. We're happy to see now that he's willing to sign it. We passed legislation that would protect senior retirement accounts from the woke ESG investments that play politics with Americans' retirement, which is wrong. Not only did we just pass it in the House, we've watched the bill become so strong, the Senate Democrats joined with us. The President threatens to veto it. We hope he stands with the American public and with their retirement accounts and would actually sign it. We established a subcommittee to investigate the weaponization of government. We moved to protect life and the institutions that dedicate their mission to helping mothers and babies. That is just a pattern of leadership just in the first 3 months. But what we've also been able to do, out of committee, we enrolled the Parents' Bill of Rights, passed that in markup. We'll soon pass that on the floor. We're introducing H.R. 1 from the Lower Energy Cost Act. This will help curb inflation, lower the price of energy, and help make America energy independent. Also, cut the permitting time, will help with infrastructure, help with renewable energy as well, and make America stronger all around by curbing inflation as well. The American people deserve nothing less than for those that they elect to keep their promise of what they said that we would do. We took our time listening to the American public on what they needed and what they desired. We put it into a plan called the Commitment to America, and we took it across this country. For the last 2 election cycles that I have been leader, we have won seats. And we have won seats in places that people didn't think we could. when I became leader, Nancy Pelosi became speaker. We both come from the same state. In those 4 years, we added 5 more Republican members of Congress. We have a majority of a 5-seat majority. So many can say we won the majority even in California. We won in Oregon, Arizona, New York, Florida. We won in places a lot of people didn't believe. And I think it was the power of the idea and the commitment to America. And we're going to keep our commitment and pass that for the American public. With that, let me introduce our Majority Leader, Steve Scalise. You could applaud him.
They're trying to remain impartial here. Good to see all of you. And this new House majority, in just a few months, is off to an incredibly strong start, fighting for the hardworking families who have been left behind by Washington for too long. And we are just getting started. As the Speaker just talked about, we wanted to come out strong, bringing a good, bold, conservative agenda to the House floor that addressed problems that families are facing all across America. And frankly, most of those problems that families are facing are the result of the failed policies of Joe Biden's reckless spending, radical extreme regulations, continuing to just want to appease the radical left at the expense of lower income families who are paying more for everything that they have to buy to live their lives. So we said we were going to address inflation when we ran and rolled out the Commitment to America. We were going to focus on lowering energy costs. We were going to address our open southern border so that we can actually have security again at the border. We said we were going to fight for those parents who want to have a say in their kids' education and who deserve nothing less. And we talked about dealing with crime all across communities in America. And on every one of those points, we've already been taking strong action. We've had a number of bills pass through the House and go over to the Senate. We had a bill that even some in the D.C. press called a partisan bill that President Biden said he opposed, that said if a violent criminal in D.C. commits a crime like carjacking at gunpoint, our bill said you shouldn't be able to walk scot-free and not serve a single day in jail, as the D.C. Council wanted. When we said you ought to serve mandatory minimums that used to be in place, President Biden said no. We didn't worry about the uphill battle that bill might have faced. We said we made a commitment to fight for those families who deserve to be safe in their communities, and we passed that bill to the Senate. And ultimately, as the Senate felt pressure from people, not just in D.C., but in communities all across the country, as they watched the mayor of Chicago get voted out of office because she was soft on crime, they said, maybe we don't want to be the last ones left on the wrong side of this issue, and they finally passed it to the president. When the president realized the bill was going to be on his desk, he reversed course and said he would sign it. And you know what? I think that's going to happen with a number of these other bills that we're moving forward. As we're on the forefront of bringing the Parents' Bill of Rights in just a few days in the House and having a robust debate on Julia Letlow's bill that really represents the fabric of America. Parents having a say in their kids' education when they just wanted to get the curriculum during COVID. You had some in the President's Justice Department calling them domestic terrorists and saying they shouldn't have that right. When the President had to make a choice over and over again, do you side with union bosses or kids? There was no middle ground. You had to pick a side. The President over and over again sided with union bosses against kids, and parents got outraged. The good news is Republicans took action to stand up for those parents, and we're going to have a vote on the House floor, and everybody gets to pick a side. Do they want to stand with the kids as well, who deserve the opportunity that comes with an education, or are they going to side with union bosses? And then a week later, we're going to bring the Lower Energy Costs Act to the floor. A combination of about 20 different bills from 3 different committees: Natural Resources, Energy and Commerce, and Transportation, where again Republicans are following through on our promises to fight for those families who are tired of paying 40% more at the pump when they fill up their car, or double digits more in their household electricity bills because of President Biden's failed agenda. And so the lower energy cost is focused on fighting for those families. I know Chuck Schumer and others in the Senate right now think that they're going to just be able to be opposed to this and that nobody's watching. Yet all those families in New York that are paying too much for their energy, I think they're going to be vocal saying, why should a senator side with Saudi Arabia sending us energy when they can get our energy from America? We do it cleaner, we do it more efficient than anywhere else in the world. So people are going to have to pick a side. And I hope they side with those families who are struggling. In fact, one of the things we have in that bill, we get rid of President Biden's $6 billion energy tax when he put a tax on natural gasoline that people are paying in their household electricity cost. That's $6 billion more in the pockets of hardworking families that's in our bill. Bringing more critical minerals back from countries like China so we don't have to be dependent on China. We're going to continue fighting for those hardworking families who have been left behind too long. And then you're seeing the committee's Judiciary and Homeland Security working on a border security package. You're seeing Financial Services and other committees working on a bill to address inflation. This Republican majority will not stop working a single day for those families who are struggling under the weight of President Biden's far-left radical agenda. There's a way to get our country back on track. The commitment to America laid it out, and House Republicans in our majority are following through on those promises to stand up for those families. And the man who counts the votes to make sure we can pass this agenda is our whip, Tom Emmer.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and everybody for being here. It's great to be here in Florida at the GOP majority member retreat. And just so you can put it in perspective, I left 5 degrees this morning in Minnesota. So all of you who are sitting here, it's so cold, it could be worse. Look, in Congress, we have a lot to get done this year. And we've geared up for the tough fights ahead. But already, House Republicans have Democrats on defense this Congress. We've consistently forced them to make a choice between their leftist ideology or come along with Republicans as we govern. The Republicans have been on offense, on crime, on COVID, on China, on inflation, on oversight, and a whole lot more. Now House Republicans are continuing the offensive streak with H.R. 1, a critical step to combat Democrats' double-digit inflation crisis. And later this week, hopefully, we'll be voting on the Parental Bill of Rights. I want to thank our Speaker for his leadership. I know that's Julia Letlow's bill, but this has been something that you've championed since we were in the minority. Seems like a long time ago. Show me a Democrat who can vote against more parental transparency in the classroom, and I'll show you a Democrat who's on defense. Like I said, we have a lot of legislating still to do this year, but House Republicans are working as a team, and we're governing because that's what the American people elected us to do. With that, I'll turn it over to our chairwoman, Elise Stefani.
Thank you so much, Tom. Welcome to the 2023 Annual Issues Retreat. I'm very excited to announce that over 75% of House Republican members are here today, and that is an indicator of the most dynamic, most active, most working-oriented majority we've had in a long time. And the Speaker laid out, we have hit the ground running, implementing our commitment to America based upon the 4 commitments we made to the American people. Number 1, an economy that's strong. You heard from the majority leader our focus on lowering energy prices and unleashing energy independence. We also passed on a bipartisan basis my rein-in inflation bill to hold Joe Biden accountable. Number 2, a nation that's safe. Certainly that's an issue I know firsthand being from New York, where we flipped 4 seats primarily because the soft on crime policies that we are seeing in New York State. We were proud to get bipartisan support and actually get it signed into law by President Joe Biden, who switched his position when it came to nullifying the far-left D.C. pro-criminal city law that they tried to place. Number 3, a future that's based upon freedom. I serve on the House Education Committee, and we are very excited about the Parents' Bill of Rights, which really should be a nonpartisan issue. You talk to parents across this country, whether they're Republicans, Democrats, or independents, they support making sure that parents are the primary decision makers when it comes to their kids' education. And then number 4, a government that's accountable to we the people. That starts with a Congress that works and is open to the people. We got rid of proxy voting, but also making sure that we have robust robust, productive, and effective congressional oversight to bring transparency and accountability to all of the federal agencies. I'm so excited that during this retreat we have some amazing guest speakers. We'll be hosting our former colleague Trey Gowdy, who is beloved across this country, and we also are featuring NFL quarterback Drew Brees. So we're excited for those speakers, and most importantly, over the course of this working retreat, we will have members-driven discussions on important issues focused on the economy, focused on national security, focused on energy independence. So this is us getting to work on behalf of the American people, and we're so excited to have such a dynamic freshman class. One of those, I'm excited to turn it over to Erin Houchin, who won a district in Indiana, and she has hit the ground running, and she was elected by her colleagues in the freshman class as their representative to the leadership table. Erin.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much. I'm Erin Houchin from Southern Indiana, a new member of Congress, excited to be here. Thank you, Speaker McCarthy, for your leadership, and to the rest of the leadership team. The freshman class is already very hard at work. I came here to contend on behalf of the American people and the issues that matter most to them, and I was so pleased when I got here that the Speaker and the leadership team are committed to do the same. I'm a member of the Education Committee. We've heard a lot about the Parents' Bill of Rights, and happy to be an original co-sponsor of that legislation. We are facing a reading proficiency crisis in America, and following COVID, it only got worse. It's estimated only 35% of children are reading at proficient levels. It's why I offered an amendment in the markup to give parents information about their child's reading proficiency. But we're not only restoring transparency or reading proficiency, we're restoring transparency and putting parents back in charge of their kids' education. I'm a proud member of the Financial Services Committee. As a small business owner, I've seen firsthand the disastrous policies of Joe Biden's reckless spending, causing an inflation problem that is putting our very financial system at risk. You will see House Republicans contending against that issue to restore fiscal sanity to this country. I'm a proud member of the Rules Committee. And I do want to commend Speaker McCarthy and the leadership team for restoring regular order to the House of Representatives, putting the power back to the people through their elected representatives. Thank you for doing that. And I recently visited the border. Indiana is 1,288 miles from the border, but in Joe Biden's America, every state is a border state. We lost 220 Hoosiers in the 9th District to fentanyl overdoses that are coming directly from our southern border. We will fight to secure the border. I heard from Border Patrol agents who lack the infrastructure, the technology, the resources, the personnel, and we recently heard in a on-the-road committee meeting that they've lost operational control of the southern border. You will see us fighting to restore security at our southern border, and I'm proud to be part of an effort that we're leading on that. So I came here to contend for the policies that the American people care about. We will contend for those policies. I came here to contend for the American people and the future. And House Republicans, make no mistake, we will fulfill our commitment to America. Thank you. I want to turn it over now to my distinguished colleague from Northern Indiana, Rudy Yakim.
Well, thank you, Erin. It is good to be up on stage here with another fellow Hoosier. Thank you to Speaker McCarthy, to Leader Scalise, Whip Emmer, and Chair Stefanik, as well as the entire leadership team for putting this conference on, where we are coming together and talking about the issues of our time, the things that impact American families. I'm Rudy Yakim. I'm from Indiana's 2nd District, and I came in under quite unique circumstances through a special election that allowed me to experience life both in the minority and life in the majority. And what I can tell you is they are demonstrably different. It's a new day under the leadership of Speaker McCarthy. We've done things like reopen the People's House. Gone are the days of the permanent COVID mentality. We've made our legislative process more open and more transparent, as well as more accountable. But above all, this House GOP is passing fundamentally good policy out of the House. And that's in stark contrast with President Biden. Just last week, he rolled out his budget, an $82 trillion economic disaster for the American people. You know, back in the 2nd District, when I talked to families, seniors, farmers, and business owners, the single biggest issue that we're hearing about is inflation. And President Biden just simply didn't get the memo that you can't solve an issue of inflation by spending more money. His 10-year budget calls for $17 trillion of additional deficit spending on top of the $31 trillion of debt that we currently have. And that's why on the House Budget Committee, where I serve, I couldn't be more excited to be diving into this issue with Chairman Jody Arrington and figuring out how we restore fiscal responsibility to our nation. So thank you to Speaker McCarthy for making the issue of our debt front and center in the minds of the American people and articulating the fact that additional debt and additional spending will only further inflation. You know, Americans put Republicans in charge of the House, and they did so because they expect us to show up, show leadership, and advance good policy. And that's exactly what we're doing. So thank you to Speaker McCarthy and the entire leadership team. I'm proud to be partnering with you as we get our nation back on track. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the Speaker.
Thank you, Rudy. Appreciate you. Thank you all very much. And just to recap a few things, we're trying to make the House work much different than it had in the past. We just watched in the last Congress, members never had to even come back. Some didn't show up since the Speaker's vote. Bills didn't have to go through committee. The people weren't able to even participate or be there. We changed all that. Members now show. Bills have to go through committee, and we did something that I don't know if you wrote about, but actually makes a difference. For the first time in more than 7 years, we actually had an open rule. That means the whole time during Nancy Pelosi's speakership and Paul Ryan's, never did a bill ever come to the floor where any member can offer an amendment. It had been a decade since the bill ever came that way that wasn't in appropriations. It doesn't matter where you come from, you're representing Americans with their voice. It doesn't matter if you don't sit on that committee, you should have that opportunity to have a say in that legislation. The people have a right to be there, and the members should be there working. I didn't have much of a relationship with Hakeem before he became leader, but I'm trying to work hard to treat him the way I thought every minority leader should be treated, and I should have. I reach out to him on many different issues because there isn't a need that everything has to be partisan. The American people don't believe in that. Our government is designed to have compromise. I was proud of the fact we had 146 Democrats join with us on the Select Committee of China. For too long, we've given China a pass because we just had one administration change to the next. We've never spoken with one voice. With the chair of Mike Gallagher, what he's doing, if you watched the first hearing, even the Washington Post gave an editorial about it was a new day. And what was interesting is the minority leader, Hakeem Jeffries, and I sat together and met with the Select Committee on China because we wanted to speak with them with one voice to tell them that we wanted this to be bipartisan. We wanted them to come together, that America would never be dependent on China for our medical, for our critical minerals, from so many different angles, that our industry should not be dependent on China. We should bring those jobs back. And how can we work together to make that happen? I'm proud of the fact that I think we're going to be able to achieve it. We've been able to clean up the Intel Committee. For too long, that became the Impeachment Committee. It's not their role. They can sit on Judiciary, where Adam Schiff now sits. And when we first constituted that committee this time, again, the minority leader and myself addressed them together, that their role shouldn't be partisan. By the partisan bickering that happened in the Intel Committee the times before in the last Congress, we missed Afghanistan. We're behind in hypersonics. No longer should that transpire. I want Republicans and Democrats to work together in that. I want them to think differently. And the one thing we have worked on, making sure that we do not lose the battle to AI and quantum, to China or to Russia or to North Korea. The world is not as safe as it used to be. Watching the collapse in Afghanistan, the Congress in the past didn't have one hearing on it. We already did. Why? Because never again should that happen to the American military. Never again should we have another 13 Gold Star families. We've watched that, yeah, closing the Bagram jail, That's where the bomber came from. And a sniper actually had him in the sights beforehand. We could have saved those families. We could have saved Afghanistan from collapsing. And now what did we just hear in the last week? That our own generals tell us that we're less than 6 months away from being vulnerable to attack coming from Afghanistan again. We watched the Middle East shift with this new administration. We've now watched China take a role, where China now has brought Saudi Arabia and Iran together. That used to be the role of America. We watched where God has blessed this country with natural resources, where not only could we be energy independent, we could help the rest of the world. Our natural gas is 41% cleaner than Russian natural gas. Geopolitically, it would keep the world safer as well. That's why our very first bill, our number one bill, is H.R. 1. H.R. 5 is a Parent's Bill of Rights. Why is it number 5? Because that's the age your kids go to kindergarten. You should have a say in your kids' education. You should know what's being taught. You should know if there is some attack in campus as well. You should know what the money is being spent on. We don't think that's radical. We actually think both sides of the aisle should come together. Because when it comes to education, when it comes to your children, they don't ask whether you're Republican or Democrat. And the one thing we do know, our nation will be stronger the better educated our children are. For too long, we had COVID and a pandemic attack the world. But in the last Congress, they didn't have one hearing to know where the origins were created. So yes, we created a select committee on COVID as well. And now we're getting the information that's needed. That's what we promised the American public in the commitment to America. And we will continue to strive and work. During our time here, we have a few speakers on the outside, but not many. If you notice, we've been doing that quite often on these, because we believe it's our time that we work together, that we've listened to the American public, and how do we unite to only make it stronger. With that, let me open up for questions. Yes, ma'am. I think you first have to go to the question, why are we even having this discussion? Why are banks in trouble? Well, it's a direct correlation to inflation. As the economist Milton Friedman has always told us, that there's only one place inflation can be created, government spending. We watched what the Democrats took the majority. What did they do? Increased spending by $5.9 trillion. We saw the alarming and dangerous numbers come out of the Congressional Budget Office. But when inflation comes up, Milton Friedman will also explain to you, the only way to curve inflation is that the interest rate is higher than inflation. But when inflation started to rise, we watched this new administration tell us, no, it was transitory, as it continued to grow after time. Well, when inflation goes up and the banks park their money into bonds, and long term they lose with each movement up. We watched Silicon Valley Bank get into this situation. But when you sit back and look, and I know the chairman, Patrick McHenry, will do a number of hearings on this to really get to the bottom, we watched them park a great deal amount of money into long-term bonds. Not a smart move, knowing that inflation was going up with interest rates. But we also watched that they're a state bank. So yes, we will probe where were the mistakes. Did the California regulators miss something? I think we'll have a lot of questions for the Governor, Gavin Newsom, about this as well. I know he's familiar with this bank. I believe some of his companies are actually banked with this bank. We've also watched that as inflation grew by the Democrats spend more, it always puts more jeopardy into a community bank. And I think community banks are very important, and we have to keep them. Community banks are the ones that take the risk in our cities and our counties, that will make the development that others, the big banks, will not. I do not want to become a country like Canada. What do they have, 5 banks? And Ireland only has a couple name brands on both of them. I think it's important that we're able to stabilize this. And I think looking at the financial services, they'll do the hearings, and they'll understand what we need. I don't believe it's a regulation problem. They're there. Did some miss the jobs they were supposed to do? Did the feds? Yes. But it's a real culprit of all of this that has put jeopardy into this is the spending that the Democrats did that brought us inflation, lied to us about it being transitory. Even the Secretary of Treasury apologized a year later. American public has actually been hurt, not just in the price of eggs, not just their money won't go as far, but now worried about whether their money would even be or their local bank can stay around. We will work hard to make sure that they are protected. And the one thing I would add to this, if you look at the Congressional Budget Office's numbers after the Democrats have taken over and spent all that money, now in this 10-year window, for the very first time, 3 of the trust funds will go broke: transportation, Medicare, and Social Security. By the president doing nothing, by the Democrats raising how much money they did and bringing inflation, they're harming Medicare and Social Security. They're actually going to bring cuts to it. We also watched for the first time, the CBO tells us in the next 10 years, the American public will have to spend of their hard-working money $10.5 trillion just on interest. This is just paying the interest on your credit card. But if America really knew from 1940 to today that they've only had to spend $9 trillion on interest for the last 83 years, but the next 10 years they're going to spend $10.5 trillion, I think they would want something to happen, especially before the debt ceiling. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, let's walk through this. This is a DA that got more than $1 million from Soros that actually funds and for political purposes on who becomes a DA. This is a DA that has watched crime and pride himself on not prosecuting felonies, actually lowering them down to misdemeanors, which has caused a lot of the crime and why people have risen up. This is a DA that have watched 2 others, DAs, say this wasn't a crime and pass on it. You can go through law after lawyer after lawyer after lawyer will tell you this is the weakest case out there. Trying to make a misdemeanor a felony, the timeline doesn't work because it's too long past, and doing it after a person for political purposes. So it's interesting to me that he spent his whole time as a DA lowering felonies not to prosecute them. I think Republicans and Democrats alike hate this type of justice. You know, you serve in Washington, so you see the Supreme Court. You see the statue out there of the lady sitting there with a blindfold on and a scale. It's supposed to be equal to all in America. And the last thing we want or have is somebody putting their thumb on the scale simply because they don't agree with somebody else's political view. That is what's wrong, and that's what infuriates people. And this will not hold up in court if this is what he wants to do. Yes? I wouldn't just talk to the 75 million Americans. I'd talk to 330 million Americans and say it doesn't matter what side of the issue you're on. It doesn't matter if this was President Trump or if this was a Democrat. It should be equal justice in America. And stop going after people because you have political differences. I see people all the time that I have political differences. I respect their opinion. I may disagree with it, but why would you ever try to use the law for it? And it goes directly against everything that this Manhattan DA has professed. He brags about lowering felonies to misdemeanors and not prosecuting. We've watched crime in New York where people are afraid to walk the streets. We watched campaigns, and I will tell you, one of the reasons we won races in New York is based upon this DA of not protecting the citizens of New York. And now he's spending his time on this, and the statute of limitations are gone. It doesn't matter what side you're on. This is the type of thing America hates and divides us and is wrong. Yes, ma'am. I don't think people should protest this, no. And I think President Trump, if you talk to him, he doesn't believe that either. I mean, I think the thing that you may misinterpret when President Trump talks, when someone says that they can protest, he would probably be referring to my tweet, educate people about what's going on. He's not talking in a harmful way, and nobody should. Nobody should harm one another in this, and this is why you should really make law equal, because if that was the case, nothing would happen here. And that is what has to transpire. Yes, ma'am. Have I spoken to who? No, I have not spoken to Trump, but earlier in the question you referred to, I have spoken to Jim Jordan, and those are the appropriate committees. Remember, we also have a select committee on the weaponization of government. This applies directly to that. I think you'll see actions from them.
Following up on that,
yes.
You said protest, but he also says take your country back. Do you agree with those terms?
Well, it determines what you think that means in that. I think when you're referring to President Trump, I believe what he's probably referring to is make sure law is equal. He's not saying something negative in the stance, and nobody, let me be very clear, no matter what transpires, and this doesn't mean this is going to happen, but if was this to happen, we want calmness out there. Nobody per violence or harm to anything else. But what we're really saying here in this whole process is we need equal justice in America. And no one believes. Do you believe this is equal justice? Are you proud of what the Manhattan DA is doing? Do you think it's legally right? Well, what do you think about what people have said about the statute of limitations of this is gone? What do you think about when people say on both sides of the aisle that this is just what the Manhattan DA is doing is actually harming America? Do you think it's right what he's doing?
Well, I'm not an attorney, but
I know, but you get to ask questions, do I? I haven't been able to hear the president's rhetoric. I thought I'd been clear on mine. Yes, sir. Which protesters are you referring to? Because people protest my office all the time. They were just there the other day. On Friday, by the fact. Okay. The protesters at my office? But which protesters are you talking? Are you talking about the protesters at my office on Friday, or which protesters are you referring to? Because I don't see any here. Potential protesters where? Oh, not protesters against the crime rise in New York because the DA won't prosecute felonies? You're thinking just protesters somewhere else that haven't happened. I think I've been very clear that I do not believe there should be any violence to this. And when you refer just to protesters, yes, I had protesters at my office on Friday. I've had protesters who have tried to revoke violence as well, too, and I think that's wrong on any side of the aisle. But I appreciate your concern. Yes, sir. You know, there's a couple AUMFs. They also kept, is it to 2001 that gives the worldwide? This is one of the discussions we'll have here. It's something a number of members have talked about. It'd have to go through Foreign Affairs, but I think it has a clear opportunity to come to the floor. Yes, ma'am. It's very concerning, and this is another thing. You know, I just raised the question or the concern I had with China's role now in the Middle East. You know, the ramifications of what transpired in Afghanistan, when the president told us Afghanistan would sustain itself, that it was safe, it was fine. And then when he ignored the recommendations of our own military and it collapsed so rapidly, there's consequences for that. What are the consequences that we saw? Well, we watched Putin felt that now Ukraine would fall and that we were weaker. We watched the new chancellor of Germany go to China to develop a closer relationship. We watched Saudi Arabia go to China to create a greater relationship. We then watched what I'm very concerned about that we've watched in the world before in the 30s, a creation of an axis of power where China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran have bound together. You know, President Xi has only left his country one time since the pandemic, And that was for all them to meet. And now he's leaving again. So, when America becomes weak, the world is less safe. And we have watching that happen on a number of stages across the world. So it's very concerning, especially for the future. That is some of the discussions that we're having here. How do we first make America stronger? Well, we need to become energy independent. Why? Because it would help every single American lower inflation. It would make you have more cash because your electricity, your gas would cost less. It'd make America stronger because we'd have more jobs. It would also make the world safer because we can supply them and they don't be reliant upon Russia. Then from that standpoint, it'd make us economically stronger. We've watched if inflation goes down, banks won't be in such jeopardy based upon what the Democrats have done before. We could rebuild our military in a manner that we could be prepared in a stronger sense. We've watched if we don't have DAs that pick and choose who they want to prosecute and don't prosecute felonies, we've watched we could stop that, nullify in D.C., and move a new movement forward. The mayor of Chicago lost, mainly based upon crime as well. So if the streets are safer, if we can secure our border and stop the fentanyl, stop the 160 other countries of people coming across here, that would save Americans' lives as well. So we've got a lot of work to do, but I believe we're working in the right direction. Yes, sir. I didn't get to hear his comment. I know Governor DeSantis is an amazing governor. Governor DeSantis served in our military and did a tremendous job. And I know Governor DeSantis would take in all the information possible. I watched him inside Congress itself. I have a real concern of the aggression of Russia. I have a more greater concern of this axis of power coming together of China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. I watched this happen in the world another time before I was ever born. I think it is utmost important that Russia lose. I think it's utmost important that China does not think to go capture Taiwan now that President Xi changed his constitution and is now serving another 5 terms and believes to go in there. I think it's a very concerning factor to me that I don't think Iran should ever have a nuclear weapon. Unfortunately, in this administration, they reversed courses, made us weaker as well. I have a real concern about the aggression in North Korea. In the last administration, they didn't test the number of missiles they are testing today. So yes, when the administration changes and America becomes weaker, the world becomes less safe. And I think it's a very responsibility that, yes, Russia loses in this aggression. Having said all that, I also believe, though, we have to have a plan to win. Unfortunately, in 2015, when I came back from Ukraine, I went to the White House and I met with the individual in charge, the vice president, at that time Joe Biden. We sat in the Situation Room with a bipartisan group of members, and I advocated that we sell the Javelin, a defensive weapon, to stop the tanks that would come into Donbass before, to deter Russia from ever having that invasion. Unfortunately, the vice president, Joe Biden, at the time told me no, Merkel would be upset with that. I advocated then, let's sell it to them, train them, and keep it in Poland so they can move rapidly. I believe a lot of the decisions made are too late to help. So had we made decisions earlier, I believe Ukraine never would be in the situation they are today. We should learn from that fact, be able to supply our allies with weapons so they can defend themselves, but more importantly, so war would never break out and aggression would not. So when President Xi goes to Putin, I would have to make sure that we have a very clear message to both of them. Yes, sir.
House Democrats pressured AT&T to drop lower-end Newsmax. Would you support hearings
Yes.
to investigate this? And also, would you put at risk AT&T's government contracts if they are not exemplifying this?
Look, I think this movement to try to remove people simply because they don't like their political leanings or the information they provide, I'm for full transparency. So I won't believe they need to be back on the air, and people can pick and choose what they want to watch, and people can pick and see what they're able to hear and make their own discussions or their own decisions. Yes, ma'am. The Constitution allows him to. Yes. The Constitution allows him to. He has a constitutional right to run. Look, I met with the president. I just saw the president again at St. Patrick's Day Friday, and I sat down with him and said, you said we'd meet again. Every day that passes, you put the economy in jeopardy. I know the president was late in passing his budget, which makes us late in passing our budget. We first have to see what the president believed the budget should be. I don't think the president's budget is serious at all, especially in light of what has now come to fruition in our banking system. It is the wrong approach to go anywhere. His idea to continue to spend more, his idea of after this Congressional Budget Office is to come out with the amount of debt that's transpiring. We're 120% of GDP of debt. The only other time we've been in this situation was during World War II. So the approach I have taken is, we're never going to solve this problem by one party. I want to come together. I want to be responsible. I want to be sensible. The first thing we have to know is we can't pass a clean debt ceiling. I know the president advocates and says you have to do that. Schumer says we should do that. Schumer can't even pass that in the Senate today. So why prolong this? Let's sit down in a responsible way, eliminate the waste that we know that is out there. We can crawl back money that we've appropriated that hasn't been used to save America money. That will help curb inflation as well. I mean, why prolong what is going on? As I sat with the president, I said, we also can look at policies. What about work requirements? Making more people get back to work, encouragement, help the supply chain. What about doing something about securing our borders so Americans don't get killed? That would go a long way. What about doing something like H.R. 1, permitting process? I told the president, I sat there at lunch, you only like one form of energy. I like all forms of energy. But none of the energy can work forward unless you have permitting reform. Your transportation bill, none of that can move forward unless you have some permitting reform. So how are you going to get the economy moving again? Why can't we sit down, just like almost every other time we've been able to do debt ceiling increase? And the one thing I look at debt ceiling, it's the equivalent of giving your child a credit card. They charge it all the way up. You're responsible for paying it. So yes, we are responsible for paying it and being able to lift it. But would you just lift it without changing the behavior? No one in America believes that. And if he wants to prolong this longer, it only puts the economy more in jeopardy. I'm willing to sit down on any day. I'm willing to talk about every different issues and make sure we spend less, we're more efficient, we're more effective in where we go. Yes, sir. No, I think Congress should have a say. Yes, ma'am.
You are going to discuss your proposal on debt limit. Do you think you'll be able to keep a united front among Republicans on this issue? And Secretary Yellen just criticized the debt limit measure Republicans passed. Your thoughts about?
I didn't get the last part. Someone criticized something we haven't passed yet?
Secretary Yellen.
Yellen, yeah. What'd she criticize about?
The debt limit, like you are putting in risk the debt limit.
I'm putting it at risk. Let's see, I've sat down with the president. I've asked to have more meetings to solve it. She told us inflation was transitory, then she apologized for it. We now have a banking crisis because the inflation's there. President produced a budget, and in questioning with her, would the budget help the economy? Correct me again, what was her answer? And whether it helped. Look, I can take criticism, but I don't think that criticism merits anything because I'm ready to sit down and solve the debt crisis. And solving the debt crisis isn't spending more money. Yes. Please.
Publicly comment about what? I think that it's outrageous. I think that everyone in this country, Republican, Democrat, and others, should be outraged that people will actually use our justice system against their political adversaries. That's not what this country is based on. It's wrong, and I disagree with it.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm concerned about. That's why I have to investigate. Do you know the answer? Maybe you could join with me in helping it. So I talked to Chairman Jim Jordan today. I think you'll see action tomorrow. Yes, ma'am. I don't know. Did you read my tweet? I said I need to investigate. So I don't have the answers, but it has questions. So I want to get the answer to my questions. I think it's happening very quickly. I don't see my staff here right there that could. But okay. So contact us, and you'll have the opportunity to come in and on a basis to see it as much as you want. As of now, I already have a list, so you should get on the list because it's going to happen rapidly. Well, this is the challenge, okay? So the Democrats told us there's only 14,000 hours of tapes. Lo and behold, we take the majority, there's 42,000 hours of tapes, okay? So that would take me years to go all the way through. We've worked with the Capitol Police, tell us in each section that there's a problem, and that takes a long time and done, but we want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to come and see what they want, so we've created the process to make that start happening. Yes? Yes? No, I think these are ideas that when you talk to the Freedom Caucus, I mean, and I think the way you should take what the Freedom Caucus said, I mean, there's a number of you think that people in the Freedom Caucus would never vote for a debt ceiling. What they're actually doing is something much different than before. They're saying, yes, we're willing to vote for a debt ceiling. Here are some ideas that we would be for if we could do for me to vote for a debt ceiling. So I think it's very productive in the nature that the president should look back and see if there's things that he can agree with. Yes, sir. No, we don't play politics with it. Who has? Yeah? No, we won't play politics with it. They were upset about the $1 million they got? It was an attack on the $1 million the Biden family got? Because they got $1 million from a Chinese? I don't understand. They're upset they didn't get the full $3 million? We still have more bank accounts to come forward, so they could not be as upset. Maybe they got more money. We're not sure. So I think the American public has a right to know. I'm in for transparency. I don't know why they're so upset. I mean, did they have to pay tax on the money? Are they upset about that? I'm not quite sure why they would be upset that now more Biden family come forward that they got money. I mean, one was a school counselor. I don't know what she provided. They were upset that they were saying this was to create a seed money for a business that we never saw that got created. I think Chairman Comer said there's probably 11 more different bank accounts they're going after. I know they fought to cover this up for a long time, and they had Democrats in the majority that never asked any question. Didn't ask any questions about Afghanistan when 13 Gold Star families, 13 were killed. They never had one hearing on it. Millions of people across this world got killed from COVID. They never had one hearing on the origins of where COVID began. This has all changed since we took a majority. So now they're upset they got $1 million from the Chinese on the first subpoena of the bank statements we got back, and they know there's going to be 11 more. I wonder how mad they'll get. I'm not familiar with the others. I'm familiar with Soros backing a Manhattan DA. I'm familiar with our ability to win a majority by a number of seats in New York because people are concerned with crime, and they have a DA who said that he prides himself on making felonies misdemeanors so people won't serve. I've watched a city crumble because of the crime. I've watched people leave that city. This state becomes more populated because of this Manhattan DA. I watched this Manhattan DA, but more importantly, I've watched a lot of legal minds on both sides of the aisle tell you there's no case here. I've watched those that have the ability to prosecute to look at it and pass on it, that don't have political bias in it, that actually believe in the rule of law being equally provided to everyone. So yeah, I think this DA is different than all the others. And I think there was a reason why in the race for governor, had Lee won, the first thing he was going to do was fire this DA. Because that's the only recourse they have. I'd have to figure that out. Yes, ma'am. And you're cold, too. Mm-hmm. No, and this isn't our first time in Florida. The thing I'd like to explain to you, and if you've come to the other issue retreats we have, they're issue retreats. So since I became leader, I don't bring many people in to talk to us because I think it's an opportunity for all of us members to work and talk together. And if you walk through it, go. Where were we at that time? Was I the leader? I try to make the retreats all issue-oriented. Did you already ask? Yeah, but it's a great question. That's okay. I like the confidence, though. Wasted time that we hadn't had meetings yet. He said he'd have another meeting. Well, it's kind of like what he said before at the prayer breakfast. Yeah, we're going to get together. Then he told the Democrats at their retreat, yeah, we're going to meet. But he just has to tell me when I can come. I'm sitting around waiting. No, he wanted to see if the budget was out yet. Well, you know what? You know why I know the budget's not out? Because he was a month late with his budget. So it delays everything else. Why do we have to have a budget out to sit down and talk about the debt ceiling? We're not passing the budget. We're doing a debt ceiling. And he told me there that, you know, it has to be a clean debt ceiling. No things could, you can't guarantee something else on the side. I said, look, we're not going to raise taxes and we're not going to pass a clean debt ceiling. But everything else is up for negotiation, just as the American public wants us to do. The reason why we have inflation, government spent too much money. He added $5.9 trillion. The reason why we have a banking problem is because government spent too much money and he had to raise interest rates. The problem we have in the Middle East, and now the concern of the question you had before of China going to see Putin, is because the way he handled Afghanistan. So on every stage and every issue, the Democrat leadership has caused us problems, and we're trying to correct them for the American public, so tomorrow will be better than today. I look forward for the opportunity to even talk to you more as we move through this. Thank you very much. Have a good night.